We did the demonstration in 1979, got 6,000 signatures, and then we started putting posters up in cars going round who murdered Lynn Siddons. The other one, we put posters up all around town who murdered Lynn Siddons, because I was threatened with going to court for that.
Well, welcome everybody. You know me and my channel by now, that if I'm walking down onto a canal, it's never good news. But this is a murder case which is absolutely crazy. And I'm walking to a memorial marker dedicated to the spot for where it happened, and I'll go through the case. I don't know where it is, so I'll have to find it, but no down. But the case is worth hanging around for, because it is fascinating, it is frustrating, and it goes to show you how powerful one family can be when you've devastated it. But let me get my bearings and I'll jump into the story. So, Lynn Siddons was a 16-year-old girl living in Sinfin in Derby, or south of Derby, and she was brought up by her grandmother, Flo, who is the hero of this story. Now, Flo had 4 children, and one of them at 16 years old gave birth to Lynn. Gail was the name of her mother. And one night, when she was on the Sinfin estate, she went for a walk to the shops, and it was a walk that she would never return from. Now, living on the same street as the Siddons was the Brooks family, and the Siddons, obviously growing worried that Lynn hadn't returned, went to the police. The police told them that she's probably just run away and that there is nothing that they can do. She'll be back. If your 16-year-old daughter's gone missing, that is a pretty awful thing to say, and this was the start of Derbyshire police, I'm sure they're better now, just being absolutely incompetent and just almost working against the victim's family. They knocked on doors. Lynn Siddons was friends with Roy Brooks, who was a 15-year-old kid, and he had said that, this is going to be really bouncy footage, isn't it? He had said that, yeah, he was with her, but she had left. Now, you think a 16-year-old girl going missing, you would think this is just abhorrent, disgraceful, in all the papers. Back in the days when the local papers were daily, every day you would think she'd be in the paper. The Siddons had to write to the MP their local MP before they got any publicity. And that was nearly a week later. She'd been missing for nearly a week, no publicity. And then it was put in the papers, but the day after she was found, Lynn Siddons was found dead along this canal. And like I said, try and just walk us to the memorial spot. A memorial was put here 25 years after her death, on the spot that she died. But the saga for the Siddons family had only just started. You know as well as I do that the memorial marker will be that way and not the way that I'm walking. We all know that, but stay with me. When Lynn's body was found, there was over 40 stab wounds, and the police went straight away to the Brooks house and arrested 15-year-old Roy Brooks, who, while in the police station, before he gave his statement, he was allowed to see his father, Michael Brooks. Yes, before he gives his statement for murder, he was allowed to see his stepfather.
He was allowed to speak to his stepfather, but there would certainly be a policeman present.
Do you remember who that was?
I can't remember now, no.
Looking back, do you think it was the right thing for him to have been allowed to see his stepfather, given what's happened since?
I don't think it would have made any difference to the outcome.
Roy Brooks took full account for the murder of the 40 stab wounds that was inflicted on poor Lynn. But further analysis of the body showed that Lynn had been strangled as well as stabbed. And now Roy Brooks, 15 years old, smaller in weight and height than Lynn, strangling Lynn to death, all of a sudden seemed a bit unusual. Now, when Roy Brooks was in prison, he would change his statement and say that it was his stepfather, Michael Brooks, who had inflicted fatal blows and strangled Lynn. Roy did say that he stabbed her, but he was in such fear of his stepfather, and that is why he inflicted his wounds on poor Lynn. So the case went to trial for Roy Brooks, and the trial ended up being centered around Michael Brooks, and the judge had to remind him that it wasn't Michael being sentenced. It wasn't Michael on trial for this. It was Roy. And Roy was found not guilty.
Roy's acquittal was reported only in the local press. He was taken into care at the Pastures Psychiatric Hospital. While in care, he was interviewed by a senior detective, Superintendent Jim Reddington. The police had to find out which of Roy's two statements was the truth. His social worker, Keith Sherwood, sat in on the questioning. He said it was his impression the police wanted Roy to revert to the first statement. He did.
I'm sure I'm using lots of video footage from the documentary, which I'm sure I'm giving credit for the YouTube channel that posted it. It's a really good documentary, and I will say I was in this area today, and me, you know, wanting to make content for you guys and give myself, like, you know, give myself something to do, get myself out, just trying to, you know, overcome after Shield and lockdown, just reasons to get out. So I've only ever heard about this case last night, never knew of it before, and I'm amazed with how everybody kind of does true crime these days. Like, this case isn't so much bigger, because it is crazy. Now, after this, like, Michael Brooks wasn't prosecuted, so I will show you footage of Michael Brooks in an interview, on a TV interview, and I will warn you, this is a stark warning, this is the most 1970s any people have ever looked ever.
Were you involved in the attack on Lynn Siddons?
No, I was not. No.
In any way?
No.
Do you think that people...
Sorry, I just had to stop because Chainsaw Charlie was having a go. I never thought about living on a boat. Oh. Train! How beautiful it looks on a spring day. I'm not a drinker, but your boat next to the pub, just rocking up and going about your day. It looks great in spring, doesn't it? Anyway, this is, I warned you about how 70s that looks though, didn't I? My word. And never judge a book by its cover. You know, it's wrong to do that. I'm not giving you moral dilemmas over here, but he looks like a murderer. I shouldn't say things like that, but I think he looks like a murderer because doesn't he look like Fred West? What was going on in the 1970s? So this was it. This was like, to the police, this was like the end. I don't really understand why nothing more has been done. I imagine they didn't think they had enough evidence to prosecute Michael Brooks, but the Siddons family are left with nothing. But as I said in the intro, if you devastate a family that is rich in love, it can overconquer nearly anything. And so the Siddons family, led by Flo, they were not going to let this lie down, and they pushed and they wrote to anyone in power, they wrote to anyone and everyone to get more information, to get prosecutions, to do something, to get a bit of justice. Now, the Brooks family were forced to move because Sinn Féin, like a little working class council estate, you know what they're like. They're not rich in money, but they're rich in morals, and good morning. They weren't gonna give them an easy time because they knew what was what.
The victim's family demonstrated outside Derby police station and marched through the streets, claiming the case had been quietly closed.
We did the demonstration in 1979, got 6,000 signatures, and then we started putting posters up in cars going round who murdered Lynn Siddons.
Oh, and just so you're aware, yeah, no sign of memorial yet. I'm going the wrong way, we all know I am. So, doggy. So it ended up Michael Brooks had to move. He moved to Peterborough. He'd moved in Derby, and then he met up with somebody in a pub, and he arranged to swap houses. He moved to Peterborough, the other lad moved to Derby. Let me just get past these folks. So, could you do that in the 1970s? Alright, Barry, how you doing? I fancy moving to Peterborough. Who thinks that in the deepest, darkest depression, but yeah, I want to move to Peterborough. Oh, okay, you can have my house and I'll have yours. Can you do that? Look how still the water is. So he was in Peterborough. The Siddons family not letting this go. Unfortunately though, Flo, the grandmother, in her 70s, was working every hour. She had racked up thousands and thousands of pounds of fees and court fees. But 8 years after her death, so what, 1986, she got a break. The Law Society looked into the case and they said, we will fund her trial. Her problem, the Siddons family's problem, was they could go for a private prosecution, they just didn't have the money, and the police weren't doing anything about it. It was just left by the police. In the story, I just don't understand what's happening with the police in it at all. So yeah, she got, the Law Society said they would fund a prosecution, but this was for criminal damages. And somebody else is coming. So this was for, they could only raise the money for criminal damage prosecution. Now, Roy Brooks turned up in London for the case and opposed to the trial that was in Derby, where only people in Derby knew about it. It didn't reach any kind of mainstream publicity. It was only a story in Derby, but in 1991 for the criminal court case, it was a big deal. It was an historic case. It was the first time criminal damage were set in a murder trial where nobody had ever been convicted.
The damages action in London was the first for a murder of which no one had been convicted.
After this, the case was now in all the newspapers and in the spotlight, and Michael Brooks' life got even worse. Happy times.
Michael Brooks, the target of the court action, never came to court. He stayed in the quiet of East Anglia. But even in his absence, his personality and his alleged sexual habits dominated proceedings. It was said he got pleasure from using knives, that he'd stabbed pictures of nude women, that he'd talked of getting girls, and had threatened to harm his wife if the attack on Lynn Siddons hadn't succeeded. His barrister chose not to call him to defend himself against the allegations, arguing there was no direct physical evidence to link Mr. Brooks with the murder.
So, do you think that everything that the Siddons family has done to this point, that this story would end here after the criminal damages trial? Absolutely not. Flo at this point, and I don't want to just gloss over, which I think I did when I was speaking about it, that, yeah, I said 1991, the criminal damages trial, and yeah, she was killed April 1978. Yeah, this is how long this family were fighting for some justice. Flo by this point had just lost her retirement, lost her granddaughter, and was in serious debt. So she wasn't going to stop. Where Michael Brooks crying about his little life, having to move 14 times in 18 years, and he had to be hoarded up in his home because of the abuse he got when he left his house. I mean, seriously. Don't kill somebody then, pal. But Flo fought away, battled away, and it was her mission to get somebody put in prison for the murder of her granddaughter. Update. Still not found the memorial marker. It's the other way. I've gone about a mile this way.
Well, we just want to say that we're hoping for a criminal trial now. And we wouldn't have had to do all this in the first place if the police had done the job properly.
In Peterborough, Michael Brooks remained indoors. Visiting reporters became the target of his wife's frustration. Upstairs, Michael Brooks denounced the Siddonses and his stepson.
It's not only the Siddons, now Roy's a bleeding liar.
Will you say to us, in your own words, that you did not kill Lynn Siddons, which is what you're saying, isn't it?
I already told you that.
Then he accused the Siddonses of threatening him.
You'll ask them about the plan to murder me and my daughter. Go on, ask them.
Plot twist. I was going the wrong way. If you can see that bridge, my car is parked there and I went an hour in the other direction. So the last time you saw me was actually an hour ago. So things that I've missed out on. When Roy Brooks went into the criminal damages court hearing, that's where he said that he did some of the stab wounds to Lynn. But his stepfather wanted to be like Jack the Ripper, and they stabbed her and they chucked her in the ditch, which is just here. Also, the girlfriend that you saw Michael Brooks with, the one that had like the perm afro, only way I can describe it is the one that was in the 1970s. She at one point broke up with Michael and said that he had admitted to her that he had killed Lynn. And she was writing to the family, the Siddons family, and saying this, and they even asked her, are you gonna, if he comes back, are you gonna retract this statement? She said, no, I don't want him back. And anyway, Michael Brooks came back and she retracted the statement. But the case took a surprising twist in the mid-90s when Michael Brooks' solicitor, Stephen Chittenden, and I can't believe this doesn't happen more often, his conscience just got the best of him and he knew he had done this. And so Michael Brooks' solicitor gave the Siddons family solicitors paperwork that implicated, is that the right word? Michael in the murder of Lynn. And that's how he was finally jailed, 1996. And Michael Brooks is in prison for the murder of Lynn Siddons, who was killed here on the edge of this canal in 1978. I'll put a picture of Flo on the unveiling of this plaque. It was 25 years after, 2003. It reads, in loving memory of Lynn Siddons, aged 16 years, tragically killed April the 3rd, 1978. Deep in our hearts you will stay, loved and remembered every day. It's still looked after by the family and they still come back and tend flowers to it. The hero of the story, Flo, as you probably would have guessed just by age, she's not alive anymore. She died in 2007, age 92. And what a crazy story. And the solicitor was obviously, well, he was at the end of his career. He was fined and he can no longer be a solicitor anymore for giving away the information. goes against practice, but I can't believe it doesn't happen more often. But that is the story. I thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed. And I will leave a link to the documentary that I've used quite a lot in this video. It's a really good, really interesting case. But obviously, above all else, somebody was found brutally killed here at the start of her life. Thank you so much for watching. So, before I go, I do have people messaging me sometimes about the walks that I do, asking where they are. So, this one I'm in South Derbyshire. This is Sinfin Lane, the road. That's where I started, that set of stairs. That is Bridge 16. Go right, about 300 yards on your right. If you're more interested in the pub and stuff, that's that way. But yeah, we're in South Derbyshire. This is the Mersey-Trent Canal, and that is Bridge 16. Head towards 15, not 17, and you can park just over there like me. Take care, bye.